Rigor is not a new concept introduced by the Common Core state standards. We've been concerned about rigor for many, probably since schools were established. We wanted kids to work harder. We wanted teachers to teach better. We've wanted rigor in everything that we have ever done. The Common Core state standards may have turned our attention back to it, and if so, that's great. It's a good outcome of the Common Core standards.
Can I interrupt before you go on?
Sure.
You know, when he says that we've been thinking about rigor for a while, you're a little too humble to mention it yourself, but in a book you wrote in 1983, 2, 1,
You don't have to give the date.
in the previous century, in the last part of the previous century, Response and Analysis, Bob begins that book by talking about the role of rigor in a classroom. So actually, when I saw the Common Core folks step in and say, you know, we need standards that are rigorous and push that word, I thought, seriously, this isn't new. You've been talking about rigor for quite a while. Because you've been around for quite a while.
Yes, there is that, I
Yeah.
suppose, yeah. But well, thanks for
You're
the
welcome.
comment.
Yeah.
But the danger in the attention to rigor is that it's going to be too simply interpreted. And rigor can be too easily interpreted to mean hard. We want kids to do more rigorous work. Let's give them harder texts to deal with. I think that's likely to be counterproductive. I think the essence of rigor probably is going to be found not in characteristics of the text, but in characteristics of the transaction the reader has with the text. The single most rigorous reading I ever witnessed, I saw take place in the hallway outside my classroom one day. 12th grade classroom, one of my students was standing there poring intently over a document he held in his hand. And I could tell by every gesture he made and every expression on his face that he was reading this text with great rigor. He didn't notice the football players jostling him as they walked past. He was too focused on interpreting the significance of every word, the significance of every punctuation mark in this document. And I was very curious to know what it was that had elicited this kind of energy and attention, because I couldn't get that out of him with the texts I was assigning in the class. So when he came into the room, I looked over his shoulder to see what the document was, and I discovered that it was a 2-sentence note from his girlfriend. But he needed to know what it implied, what it meant, what it told him, what it foretold him about the weekend or the senior prom or whatever he was concerned about. The rigor didn't come out of giving him a difficult text. It came out of giving him a text that mattered to him in the context of his own life. So it seems to me that as we talk about rigor, what we need to talk about is the interaction of the text and the student, the way those two come together.
Well, what you're really saying is that he gave it a rigorous read because what that note said was highly relevant to him.
Yes.
And what we would suggest to you is that rigor without relevance is simply hard. And that doesn't mean anyone's going any deeper into the text. And that's really what we talk about in these few pages of where does rigor fit. What we would encourage you to do, either with your professional learning community or even if you're just reading this on your own, is to start by writing down your own definition of rigor. We think that's especially important when you're in a school situation with the whole faculty, because if one person on your faculty thinks that rigor means more homework, and someone else thinks it means, well, you don't make a poster, but you make, a 25-slide PowerPoint. And someone else thinks rigor means you just give them harder and harder texts. And someone else thinks it means, no, actually it's about teaching kids to be more creative and having more conversation. Then you're going to create a lot of confusion in your school by everyone having different definitions. we're not going to tell you a definition of rigor. We've offered our thinking right here on these pages, and we've offered prompts for you to keep having conversation. But start this section by reading your own writing your own definition. Then come together and share those. Read these pages, and then see if you can eventually come up with a collaborative definition. We think that that's very important, so that it's rigor and not rigor mortis that we bring into a school.
You might also think back over your last weeks or months of teaching and try to recall the moment in class when you saw the most rigorous work out of students, when they were talking with the most energy, with the most focused concentration upon understanding the text, and ask what it was about that moment that made that so rigorous. What contributed to the energy they brought to that text?
We hope you have a great conversation. I'm Kylene Beers.
And I'm Bob Probst.